Thank you so much for taking out of your morning to join us for our third Future Focus Manchester. I want to thank Mayor Rouet for taking the time to do this. And it's really amazing to have this level of increased collaboration and transparency with our chamber members and to give this opportunity for direct question and answer. Just don't want to underestimate the value of that, kind of in the New Hampshire spirit of giving direct access to our political leaders, but this is even a step farther and above and beyond. So thank you, Mayor Rouet, for taking the time to do this and allowing us to get our questions answered. As hopefully you know, today we are talking about the City of Manchester budget. So that's what you are here for. We're glad that you could make it here today, and I'm going to turn it over to the mayor to do a presentation of the budget, and then after we will do our usual town hall, and I'll run around with that microphone. You can just raise your hand and ask away. So without further delay, I'll turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you so much, Heather, and thank you to everybody with the chamber as well. And thank you all for coming out. We were joking about it earlier, but this is actually, so I delivered my budget address about 2 weeks ago, and this is a far bigger crowd than what I had for my budget address. I think, we probably had 15, 18 people that were in there, and of that, 15 of those 15 were department heads. So this is significantly bigger. So I appreciate you all coming out. So I thought what we could do is kind of walk through a little bit on the process side and then kind of give some highlights from the budget address. And then I'd really love to just open it up to Q&A. And so I've done 17 town halls now, one in every ward last year, and then we started again at the beginning of this year. So even if the budget is not that sexy topic you wanted to talk about, I'm happy to answer any other questions about the city in general and where we're going as the Queen City here in Manchester. So just I'll jump right in. So basically on the process side, right around December, we start to really think as a city about putting together our budget. And really what kicks off that effort is I send budget instructions to our department heads. So what I'll do is I'll say, for example, what we've done the last 2 fiscal years is I'll send instructions to all of our department heads, and I'll say, look, I want to know what your budget would look like with a level fund, a -1 cut, or a -2 cut, and then I want to know what your steps look like, your longevities, your merits, and whatever that COLA is this year. So last year, my first year as mayor, the cost of living adjustment was 4%. So what does a 4% COLA mean for your department? And then I'll sit down with all of the department heads and I'll say, okay, walk me through what the impact of what my requests are. So what does it look like at a level fund, a -1, a -2? And then I'll say, okay, king or queen for a day, what are your goals for the upcoming year? And are there programs that you want to start? Are there individuals that you would love to hire? Are there positions that you'd love to bring in? What are your top 3 goals for the next fiscal year? And from that, we really start to piece together and pull together our budget. And throughout that time period, we're also getting some updates on what meals and rooms tax looks like at the state level. We also see the beginning, because that's roughly 6 to 7 months into the fiscal year when we really get started. So we start to get a sense of what is our surplus going to look like. So the challenge that I have as mayor is, per the charter, I have to introduce my budget by the end of March. And then it goes to the aldermanic side, where I then work with the aldermen to come up with a budget, and then we have to pass it by June, because the end of our fiscal year is in June. But by May or June, or by, end of April, throughout the period of May, they're starting to get in projections from department heads of how much money is being returned to surplus. So they have access to dollars on the aldermanic side that I don't. So that just creates a challenge as I'm putting together a budget. And I think one of the things I want to stress, just because I've seen it reported, but my budget as mayor is not the last word in this process. So what I introduced on March 27th in my budget address is not the final step in this process. This is where we now go to the Board of Aldermen. We work with our department heads. We talk to the school district, and we work to find compromise, bring everybody together, and find a good resolution. So my budget's not the last word in the process. So how I opened up my budget address 2 weeks ago was I talked about the importance of balance. And this is more of like a philosophical approach, but I think it helps inform when I go into the budget, and it can help inform you kind of seeing behind the scenes of how I like to operate. I think there's an incredible importance when it comes to or having balance, and that is on the governing side, but also on the budgeting side more specifically. And what I mean by that, the example, the metaphor that I used in my budget address was the Boston Celtics last year. They won the title. Yay, go Celtics. They were ranked number 1 in offensive efficiency in 2024. They were also ranked number 2 in defensive efficiency in 2024. They were the most balanced team in the last 30 years in the National Basketball Association. They were really successful, and I think it was in large part due to the balance that they had on the offensive end and the defensive end. And I think that the same thing goes for governing. I don't think it's good when the pendulum swings too far, too fast. I don't think we should take it from here and just immediately try to move as quickly as possible. I think that everything we do should be done methodically, with thought, with reason, taking in various opinions, and then ultimately coming up with a resolution that meets the needs of the city. So that's kind of my approach. So in 2024, Zillow ranked Manchester as the number 1 hottest housing market in the United States. And we were also ranked one of the best cities in which to live, which is fantastic. It means I think we're doing a lot of really good things, and people want to live here. So that the link that I wanted to draw in the budget address, and the link that I want to draw just in budgets in general, it's not necessarily the most sexy of topics, but what I talked about in my budget address was a lot of the successes that we've seen in the city of Manchester. 15% reduction in crime in 2024. We have over 700 units in housing that are under active construction. 700 more houses or units have been approved by the planning, by the zoning board. We as a board of mayor and aldermen, we appropriated $450,000 from our affordable housing trust fund to create 40 units of transitional living for people who were previously unhoused. Fire department answers, what did I have in my address, Chief? It was like every 18 minutes, 365 days a year, the fire department is responding to a call, right? So we have all of these things that are going on that our departments are responding to, and there's a direct link to our budgeting ability, right? So I think there's the link that I tried to draw in my budget address was our budget truly matters for the long-term health of the city. So moving into the actual numbers. So over the last 2 fiscal years, last year the tax cap, everybody familiar with the tax cap in the city? So we operate under a tax cap, which is taking the last 3 years of inflation numbers, so the CPI, we take that and it's averaged, and that we cannot spend more than what that rolling 3-year average is on CPI. So last year it was 5.63%, so we could not increase spending in the city by more than 5.63%. This year, our tax cap number is 4.27%. So last year, when we ultimately passed our budget on the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, the number that was, our tax cap number was 3.43%, which was the greatest delta, that was the furthest under the tax cap we had ever come. This year, the number is 4.27%. My tax cap number is 1.94%, which is 2.33% under the tax cap. So I say that to say that we are spending our dollars very carefully, and we don't want to spend our dollars on anything more than we absolutely need. We're trying to be, fiscally responsible with how we're doing it. The recognition in there, though, is what I said, was that there has to be a balance there as well, because our budget is directly linked to a lot of the successes that we've seen. So when I get the city side of the budget, so not the school district side, but the city side of the budget, there are 18 line items on the one page that I have, 18 different departments. Those 18 departments, 3 of them make up 80% of our city spending: police, fire, DPW. So when I talked in the budget address about some of my foundational principles, again, I'm talking about the city side, but some of my foundational principles on the city side are that if somebody's calling the police should be able to have the resources necessary to respond. If somebody's house is on fire, fire department should have the ability to respond, and everybody wants their roads paved and their potholes filled, right? So we can't cut essential services is my argument. We want to make sure that we are being thrifty, but also at the same time responsible, because city has to meet those needs. And then, of course, on the school district side, the school district is inherently important to the long-term health of the city of Manchester. Yeah, I'm 39 years old. I won't tell you my wife's age. I made that mistake last year and I got in a lot of trouble. But we just had our first child. So I think about that a lot. Is, you know, if you're younger, if you have kids, you're going to look at the health and well-being of the school district if you're choosing to move there. So for the long-term health of the city, you have to make sure you have good schools as well. So we also have to be creative oftentimes in our budgeting process too. So instead of just willy-nilly cutting or gutting of departments, we can get creative with how we are spending our dollars. So in this budget, we identified $1.5 million worth of savings, and we rejected an additional $1 million worth of spending requests to help keep that tax cap number down. But so some of the good things that we did in our budget, we had $1.17 million more for our police department. And that's broken down into a couple categories, but it's specific to being able to bring on additional police officers. But, excuse me, it's also a result of a change that was made on, I don't want to get into the weeds on it, but it was a change that was made to a piece of state legislation, Felonies First, that requires our police officers to be at court more often, which does what to my bottom line? Now we're paying them time and a half or overtime to be there, which blows a hole in the budget of about $400,000. So the additional dollars we appropriated to the police department was in response to that and making sure that we're giving our police officers all that they need to do their jobs. On the with the fire department, we also built in a cash CIP line to give them an additional $200,000 to provide for the SAFER grant. So for years, the fire department had applied for this grant. It's called SAFER grant. I'm going to butcher the acronym, but effectively it allows us to hire 12 more firefighters for 3 years at no cost. It's a $3.7 million federal grant to bring on these firefighters, but in year 4, we lose all that federal funding. So the idea is we want to budget responsibly over the next 3 years to ensure that the city is not going to be on the hook in year 4 for the entirety of the cost of 12 firefighters. So we were budgeting responsibly in this budget to start planning for that cliff that comes in year 4. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I've done 17 town halls. There's not a town hall that I've been to where somebody hasn't said, hey, we got to fix our roads. We've got to fill our potholes. I got this massive hole in front of my driveway. I hit it every day and it kills me. So in our budget, we pulled from 4 different areas and are appropriating an additional $7 million to the Department of Public Works to address our roads, our paving, and filling our potholes in the city. And then on the housing side, so in my budget address, I really go through line by line a lot of the successes that we've had in housing over the last year. And we have a zoning rewrite, which anybody that was here for Director Belanger's presentation, he really walked through that first iteration of the zoning rewrite. But we're moving forward with that. We're hopeful to have something this summer and fall for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to look at. But so in my budget, we took $1.16 million in home funds, federal funds, and allocated it to close the final gap that they had to finish, excuse me, to finish the Pearl Street lot, which is 125 units of affordable housing in the city. So we're really hopeful, knock on wood, that we're going to be able to break ground on that soon and see that project finally come to fruition after, you know, a few years of getting all the funding. You know, we talked about it when we did the Future Focus event on housing, but affordable housing is one of those biggest misnomers. It's affordable for the tenants, entirely unaffordable to build. You got to pull from 100 different areas. Tax credits can be really hard to get sometimes. Finding partners that want to finance these projects, certainly tariffs could have an impact on that. Inflation has an impact on that, and it's a difficult thing. So we were able to appropriate that $1.16 million to finally finish that project. And then one of the things that we've talked about that with Economic Development Office and Jody and Eric, who I'm sure you guys all know, and I've certainly had a number of conversations with the Chamber of Commerce about this as well, but lighting in the downtown. This is one of the big goals and initiatives that I've talked about both in my budget address and in my State of the City. When I talk to businesses downtown, when I talk to individuals who visit us in the downtown, we have a dark downtown. It's not well lit. And that has an impact on people feeling safe. It has an impact on public safety more broadly. But it also, when downtowns are lit up, and Jody has shown me pictures from all over the country, it is such a warm, inviting feel to it when you can come downtown and everything is beautifully lit, and it makes you want to come back. So it's a really exciting place to be. So in our budget, we took $100,000 in that cash CIP line, and we put it towards lighting up our downtown area. We're still working on kind of the specs for that, but that's something that we're really excited to move forward with. The other piece of the budget that we have when we put together is community development block grants, so CDBG. So that's funding from the feds as well. And we have, as I've talked about repeatedly, the metaphor that I like to use when I think of it, the metaphor that was given to me was an executive is kind of like an archer. So whether you're a superintendent, whether you're a CEO, governor, mayor, whatever, an executive is like an archer. You're the one that pulls back the arrow in the quiver, and then you let it go. You point the direction, and then you let it go. And then that arrow is acted upon by outside forces. So if me as mayor, if I don't have good department heads, if I don't have great nonprofits like the Boys and Girls Club, if we don't have great community partners who are working on issues, that arrow is going to go any which way. And so we're very blessed here in Manchester to have such incredible nonprofits that we work with, community partners that we work with. So I say all that to say this: the CDBG process is really a phenomenal one. Greater Manchester Mental Health, another one. But the CDBG process is a really, an MPAL, sorry. This is what happens, right? You start with one, and now I'm picking out, and then someone's gonna walk out and be like, that jerk didn't mention me. But the CDBG process is really an incredible process. So all of the nonprofits that are applying for the funds through the city, they come in and they make like a 3 to 5 minute Shark Tank pitch on why their nonprofit should receive X amount of funds requested. And you really get to hear about the amazing, amazing work that's going on in the city of Manchester and the state of New Hampshire. And then we take those dollars, we work with the planning department, and we allocate them through the budget. So a couple highlights from my budget: we gave $42,600 to Meals on Wheels, $63,000 to Amoskeag Health and Helping Hands Outreach, $15,000 to CASA, which is near and dear to my heart because I was a CASA for a time, $9,000 to the Child Advocacy Center, $9,000 to Big Brothers and Big Sisters. So that CDBG process is extraordinarily important for the city and to a lot of our community partners. The other last piece on the bonding side, so bonding is borrowing, right? So every year we can bond a certain amount. We can bond a certain amount that doesn't really impact our debt service. So one of the line items that I have, or that any mayor has in their budget, is debt service for the city. So the more you bond, the more debt you have, the more you have to pay for it. So we try and keep our bond number, our borrowing number, relatively low. But through borrowing, we can also do some really cool things too. So one thing that Alderman Barry and Alderman Barry's been a really great leader on this, but also there are other two aldermen as well on the west side, Alderman Vincent and Alderman Thomas. But there's a Wolf Park master plan that has been under conversation for a number of years. And so through the bonding process, we put $500,000 towards putting together all the plans that have been talked about and Jim's been there to a couple of those. But to put together that master plan and actually have the engineering specs really built so that next year we can actually start to put into place the phased implementation of the Wolf Park master plan, which is just going to be gorgeous. And when you think of an area in the city that is truly in need of development from a playground recreation standpoint, the west side is a big piece. So through bonding, we were able to do that, or at least get the ball rolling on it. So the last piece on this that I'll talk about, and then I can open it up to questions, is on the school district side. So the school district came forward. They made a request of $11.5 million. In my budget, I allocated $2 million to that. Last year, I allocated $1 million. This year, I'm proposing we allocate $2 million. So the requests over the last 2 years from the school district is $16.7 million. What I proposed allocating, in addition to what came last year from the city side, is $3 million. So it's a reduction in a request of $13.7 million. The school district also, through state adequacy aid last fall, received $6.5 million from the state. So when you add up those totals, if my budget were to pass, which again, my budget's not going to be the last word on the matter, but if my budget were to pass, they will have received $9.5 million more since I became mayor, and the request that they have made has been reduced by $13.7 million. But just to, I know that this was written about in the paper a couple times, and I just want to dispel anything out there. This is not a cut to the school district. It is a reduction in the request. But this is what I said at the beginning, and what I'll say again is that this is part of the iterative process of budgeting, where we want to make sure where, you know, as mayor, I have a global job. All 18 of our departments and the school district as well. We have to make sure we're meeting the needs of all of it. So yeah, so that's the final piece is on the school district side. We're working through it right now with the Board of Aldermen. We'll have further conversations next week. We have both a school committee meeting on Monday and a Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting on Tuesday, and we're going to work together to really finalize that budget, both on the school district side, but on the city side more broadly, over the next few weeks to really come up with a good compromise solution that meets the needs of our city, our school, and our residents. The last piece that I neglected to mention was the compensation study. So about 2 years ago, just prior to me becoming mayor, Mayor Craig had commissioned a compensation study for the city to find out where our city employees, we have about 1,250 city employees spread across 13 unions. So she commissioned a study to figure out where we were in terms of market pay. And the study was completed last year, and it found that we were significantly behind market pay for our city employees. So it's been a big push of mine and members of the Board of Aldermen to get that compensation study implemented and into our union contract and negotiations this year, because with the exception of 2 police unions and I believe it's Waterworks, but 2 police unions for sure. All of our other contracts are up this year at the end of June. So we wanted to implement that compensation study and draw a consensus that that was what we wanted to, the ultimate number that we arrived upon is included in my budget. So the compensation study cost $7 million. We're pushing forward with that. It was included in my budget. We're working on finalizing union negotiations to give all of our city employees a raise. Now, why that matters, if we have 20 vacancies in our police department, we hover between 30 to 40 vacancies in our Department of Public Works. Those vacancies, as a result, in part, not entirely, but in part, on lower pay, lower compensation, we have, you know, folks in our DPW, particularly on those lower levels, they go up to Concord because they get paid $3 an hour more, or they go to Nashua because they get paid significantly more to be a police officer or what have you, just by way of example. But that hurts our ability to perform our necessary city functions, paving our roads, responding to fires, responding to crime incidents. That hurts our ability to respond to the things that are necessary for the city. But it also ultimately drives up costs, because when you have vacancies, those vacancies still need to be filled at times, and then you're doing what? You're paying overtime, you're paying time and a half, right? So like last fall, the police department came to us, and they, at the time, September, October, they had about $800,000 worth or their projected overtime expenses through the end of the fiscal year at that time was about $800,000. That is a massive overrun. So if we can fill some of those vacancies so that they don't have to be paying time and a half or double time, that ultimately reduces both the cost, but also increases our ability to respond to crises or things around the city. So everything in budgeting and governing is it's a balancing act. It's a tightrope, and it's a great way to make a lot of friends. But it's a fantastic process, and it's an important one for the city long term. So how long did that take me? Did that in about 15, right? Yeah. Happy to open it up to any questions, whether it's on the budgeting side or more broadly about any other issues that folks might want to talk about.
Who has a question? Wow, it's loud. Questions? Okay. Rick.
Thank you, Mayor, for all you do. I appreciate it. You know, my big challenge is, again, it's everything short-term, Band-Aids, potholes, but our streets aren't being repaved. And, I get names for potholes on North Street because, it seems every time I take my eye off for a second, I hit that pothole. But it's being filled in correctly. DW is doing a great job. They respond pretty quick. So I'm always looking at the long-term picture as a business person. And I know in the city it's hard, as aldermen, voted officials, things like that. And because the biggest issue I see is in our schools as a business owner. I'm looking at Florida now and, do I want to open up another business and put it in Florida, or do I want it in New Hampshire? And the quality of students just isn't there. I went to public school, and it's like for 40 years, nothing has really changed. And the outcomes are getting worse and worse. And I see us putting more and more money towards a system that's 40 years old that isn't getting the results. Fourth grade reading is so critical, but I don't hear of a program or a new ideas to help stimulate that and fix that problem at the fourth grade level, so we won't have kids in high school that are at the fifth grade level. And to me, that's the biggest issue. And I know it's a long-term planning, but here we are, you said every year we're putting more money into the school system, but we're not getting results. I don't know where we are now for the stats, but a year or two ago, we were number 2 from the bottom for the entire state of New Hampshire, which makes no sense. So I'm looking for more long-term planning. Can you give us an idea of how that could be accomplished? It seems the school board, it's stuck in its ways and they don't want to make the changes. And to me, they got to be innovative. Fred Belmonte is a great guy. I've met him quite a few times, know him well. And he talks about a good innovation program where competency-based education has to take place. And there's nothing talked about like that. And we just want to put more money to the same programs that aren't getting the results.
Well, so every 3 months or so, we do an update on the board that talk about some of the highlights and successes from the previous 3 months, the previous 6 months. If you dig into the data, there have been some real strong improvements in the school district, and that was evidenced in one of the last meetings that we had where we gave updates on it. I think there are some successes that are going on in our schools. Certainly more work needs to be done, but I think if you dig into the data, there are successes that are going on there. Can we do better? 100%. But I do think that there are successes going on in our schools.
I'm sure there's successes, but more long-term planning.
Well, yep. So we have challenges in our school district that I think other districts don't have as well. I think that we have 20% of our students are English language learners. To me, that's one of the things I talked about in my my budget address last year and my State of the City this year. 1 in 5 students are English language learners, right? So perfect example of this. So my wife immigrated to the United States 20 years ago this year. She didn't speak a word of English, right? You put a test in front of her, how do you think she's going to do? Not well. Does that mean she's dumb? Of course not. Of course not, right? So we have a lot of students that don't speak the language that we have to work with to get them to a proficiency level where they can do well on tests. I grew up in Salem, New Hampshire. We didn't have any of those, challenges that we had to address in the school district. So, yes, I agree with you. Long-term planning is inherently important in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rick. I think we had, I'll come to you, Jim, next. Or you can, I'll come back to you.
Good morning, Jim O'Connell. Hi, Mayor. Thank you. The Vice Chair of the School Board. I'd love to have a sidebar with my friend in front of me here, because with great respect, most of what was said is inaccurate. But we can do that, and I'd be happy to talk about it. For you, Mayor, I think I'm glad that you pointed out that there have been improvements in schools, that we've reduced the school number from 22 down to 20. We've improved outcomes, and the data is there to show that. But ultimately, and the numbers you gave are correct, but I would just like to share a couple of, and then I'll ask you a question, was just that if your budget were to go forward right now, the City of Manchester schools would have gotten a 1.1% or 1.2% increase in city taxes over every year since 2020. Inflation's run at 4% and 5% and 6%. We came into this period with our staff being paid less than the average. You talked about losing police officers and DPW officers. We had a 6th grade science teacher leaving middle school to go to Salem to earn $22,000 a year more, $400 a week, more than a mortgage payment. So that's the basis that we started on. there shouldn't be a surprise, and you're right to point out about the difficulties that we have to meet the needs of our students, but when you're only spending 1% a year against inflation. Last year, the $1 million that the city got last year was eaten up by $970,000 in increased utilities. So that's a net zero, and we have to do everything else. So my question is, I understand the difficulties, but we have a tax cap. The tax cap we've had to live with. It's meant to be a guide. It's required of the mayor's budget. But in the end, we live in the real world. And so at what point do the schools, the least well-funded school system in the state, on a per capita basis, we fought hard and conquered to get additional money, we get some, and then there's nothing coming on the city side in the long term. So my question for you is, when does a school system actually get to either match real-world costs or get an investment from the city of Manchester? That's the big challenge.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I mean, there's the global aspect of the job that I talked about. I mean, I guess I don't understand the thrust of your question. Like, when does it get there? I mean, it gets there over time as we continue to allocate resources to it, I guess, is the short answer to your question. I mean, if you want to delve deeply into it, so the fiscal year before I became mayor, the school district's bottom line foundational number was $191.7 million. Today it stands at $234.5 million. So in the last 2 fiscal years, they've gone up by $42.7 million. And kudos. I think that the $35 million in state additional adequacy aid that was allocated, as you talk about as a result of your advocacy, I think that's a great thing. But to suggest that the city of Manchester is like cutting, as I've seen some reported, Mr. O'Connell, that's simply not accurate to suggest that we are cutting dollars. I think the conversation that we've had before and that we can have here is the global job that we have as policymakers is, yes, we have to make sure that we are funding the schools adequately. Yes, we have to make sure that we're funding the city adequately. And then on the receiving end of that is the taxpayers. This money doesn't grow on trees, and every time that we are spending a dollar, that's a dollar that we have to take from somewhere, and we have to take it from our taxpayers. So there's got to be a balance there as well, because we don't live in a world where I can just print money in City Hall. So we have to be responsible, I think, as we're allocating, not to suggest that you're saying that we should be irresponsible with our dollars, but I think we have to take in the global aspect of the job, which is to meet the needs of the city, meet the needs of the school district, while also meeting the needs of our taxpayers as well.
Okay, Mayor Mike Phillips with Alumni Ventures. Thanks for all the great work you're doing. I think working on the streets and lighting up the downtown, responsive to Jody's ideas there, and working with Heather in the chamber and all is great. And I think the lighting idea is going to be awesome. Zoning, dealing with that, it really helps with affordable housing, the ability to people to add rooms and spaces in the neighborhoods with houses that we have. So I think that's also going to be super helpful in terms of the city itself. The question I have is, we're down at in the mill buildings, and so is there any plans to try? So we're a little bit cut off down there, I guess is sort of my point. And Elm Street is great, and so I just don't have an answer. It's a question.
Any plans
to kind of like help integrate the down by the river with the city, with Elm Street, et cetera, or again, and you could expand it to other areas of the cities that you want to kind of make vibrant, like Elm Street as well.
Yeah, so I mean, there are a number of long-term projects. So like the RAISE grant, that's something that the city has been working on for a couple years, but that's more towards the southern end. I think there's going to be an explosion in the mill yard, obviously as a result of Army, the Army grant coming in. I think you're going to see, I mean, you're already seeing the biofabrication and the investment from United Therapeutics, and the 37,000 indirect jobs that are going to be created as a result of that. So, I mean, I think you're going to see an explosion there. There are some parcels of property that we've also looked down there to get creative on whether it's housing or whether it's a park area. So I do think you're going to see some integration in that front as well. If Dean Kamen had his way, we would build our Disney tram, or our, what was it? Where'd Jody go? Did she leave? The monorail. Yeah, we'll get a monorail that connects you from the Mill Yard over to the Fisher Cats up to Snoo Arena, and then around and around we go. Which should, well, theoretically, it would alleviate a lot of the parking challenges and issues down there. But yeah, but no, I hear you. It's not like it's a long walk, but sometimes you can feel like you're in a different city down there than being in the actual that cross.
Yeah, walking is always a great solution. So
Yeah. Right. Or biking. Yeah. Yeah.
Other questions? Who's got one? Doesn't have to be about budget, remember. You got the mayor right here in front of you. Okay. Rick's going to go for a repeat.
I texted you about pensions, so if this is a pension question, refer to your text.
No. Thank you. No, it's more about development, affordable housing. I wasn't prepared to talk about that, but with affordable housing, the word affordable is real tricky, as you know.
Yeah.
That's $3,000 a month is considered affordable. That's $36,000 a year. But the city, more the Board of Mayor Alderman is going to, I'm seeing more tax credits going out to developers, not necessarily returning anything in return. I know the Langley building had donated 30% of their units to lowering the rents to around $1,400, which are reasonable. Can we put a structure in place where there's a formula that a developer could look at and say, look, if you're coming and you want to build here and you want a 7-year tax credit, you got to give up a minimum of 10% towards some type of workforce affordable housing.
So as you know, for some developers that works, for some it doesn't. Like a higher end developer who's doing market rate apartments has a much different business model than does somebody who does affordable housing specifically, or like 60% of AMI, 80% of AMI, workforce development, right? So if it's affordable versus workforce development, or workforce housing versus market rate, those guys all have different levers to pull. They all have different financiers that they work with. And I don't want to distort. I don't like the idea necessarily of placing caps on things and distorting the market. I think in areas where, like this is the conversation I had with our director of planning, Jeff, director of planning community development. I don't like the idea of caps. I think that that's a distortion of the market that I don't think has been successful elsewhere. Just like I don't like the idea of rent caps as well. And Concord shot that down last year. Presumably they'll do it again this year. But the BMA, like for 79E, the tax credit 79E. So with the Lamont Hanley building, they offered themselves, because this is the market that they're in. The developer that's doing the Lamont Hanley building, they're in the affordable housing business space. So they got an extension of the 7 years, I think, to 9 years, and they specifically said we will make 14 of these units available for affordable, for vouchers. They're going to take a number of our veterans as well. I just put out an update yesterday that we've now housed 40 veterans through our initiative to end veterans homelessness in Manchester, so we're really getting close on that. It's really exciting. Yeah, so there are things that we can do. I don't know that I would want to make it a hard and fast rule. That was something that the developer was willing to do because they're in that market space, and the board was thrilled when they said that they were going to do it, but I don't know that I would want to make it a hard and fast.
I'm just looking from a fair perspective. You got a bigger development, 300 units on Auburn Street, whatever. And
Sure.
They're getting 7 years of tax breaks. And I can see the tax breaks from a business perspective. When you're trying to attract a business, they're going to bring in 500 employees. It's going to help add a lot of income revenue to the city. But in this case, we're giving them 7 years tax-free. They probably would have built it with or without. I mean, they can make up a budget.
You talking about the Brady Sullivan?
No.
They didn't get 7, they got 5.
No, I'm talking about in reference a regular developer can come in and get the 7 year with no restrictions, on that, giving up free
Well,
apartments.
theoretically, but that's just the way the RSA is written, but the board doesn't typically allow for that. So the board of mayor and aldermen is ultimately the one that says 5 years, 7 years, 9 years, and I can't remember, certainly not in my term, where somebody has come in, asked for 7, no questions asked, got it. I mean, they have to meet very specific criteria, and the board typically doesn't grant longer than 5 years.
But giving out tax revenue is my key point there. You know, if a developer's coming in for a high-end unit, he's going to get some type of tax reprieve, and then you get the poor guy on, you know, trying to help out and keep a, you know, do the right thing by allowing 30 units to come into his building. It's like, to me, more money should go to some type of incentive to developers to help provide some type, because it's not going to get, affordable housing is not going to happen here unless we manage it somehow through that process.
Yeah. Yep, I don't disagree.
Thank you, Rick. Other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
We had one.
You alluded to the aldermen have access to additional funds that are outside your purview. Can you elaborate on that?
So every year when we're budgeting for, well, any year, well, when we budget, all the departments will say, we project we're going to have this much revenue. We project we're going to spend this many dollars. So at the end of the year, as things get closer, they'll say, oh my gosh, we got a lot more revenue than we thought, or oh my gosh, this didn't cost anywhere near as much as we thought. So that turns into surplus that they return to the city. So I don't really have access to that in March because it's not close to the end of the year when they're still going to be pretty conservative with their estimations. But come April, May, end of May, when they have to give all that money back, now they're going to say, yeah, I got 100 grand I can turn back, or I got 75. And then all that comes together from the different departments, and suddenly they're sitting on a pot of money that I had no access to in March. So it changes what they can do versus what I can do. Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, oh, good, you have one. I was going to say. Okay.
Mayor, there is incentives for department heads to watch the dollars that they spend to reduce the cash going out and retaining that, turn that back in. Or do they get their budgets and the effort is to just spend, spend, spend?
No, so I mean,
I'm not sure if I'm asking that.
I understand what you're saying. So yes, I don't know that other municipalities have ever implemented like an incentive specifically. I will tell you the incentive is that we have a mayor that watches this closely. We have a board of mayor and aldermen. Every month we get updates from the department heads. So like our first meeting of every month, we get an update. Here's where we stand from a financial standpoint. All the department heads have to give all that money to our finance director, and then it's all made public. So there's an incentive from that standpoint because it's transparent, it's open, it's accessible to the public, and because we're not a sprawling, $100 billion city. We're a city of 115,000 people, 437 million and change budget between the city and the school district side. And I do department head meetings every month with all of our department heads. So it's small enough where that level of accountability is in there because I'm always asking those questions. And if I'm not asking them, the board of mayor and aldermen certainly is asking them during our monthly meetings when the finance director has to give her update. And then of course, so here's the ultimate piece to it. So if I see, like at the end of the year, if I see, you pick a department, if I see the planning department comes in and they tell me we have a $750,000 surplus, I'm going to say, hey, Jeff, come on in. We're going to have a conversation about why you requested all this additional money and you didn't spend anywhere near it. Now, Jeff is amazing. He knows, he forgets more about municipal planning than I'll ever know. But that's just one example. So if a department goes way over or anticipates something way over than what they actually needed, then next year when we go through the budget process, I'm going to say, look, you requested this last year and you didn't come anywhere near meeting that number. We're going to reduce it. So the accountability is short, clippy budget processes. So the state does a biannual budget, right? So they can jump in every once in a while, but because I'm basically always in budget season. Like it starts in December and it runs through June. I get 4 months, 3 months, and then I'm already starting to think, all right, what's next year's tax cap going to look like? So because we're on that rolling 3-year basis, 3 years ago, inflation was still really high. We lose that number, that last number from 3 years ago in next year's budget. So the tax cap is going to be significantly lower than what it is this year. If it's 4.27% this year, it's going to be significantly lower next year, because we're going to lose that, and then we'll see what inflation does this year.
Other final questions in the room? I would say for any of the downtown employers, because I see that there are a number of you in the room, I'd love for you to be able to tell the mayor how you're feeling about downtown vitality, public safety for your employees, because we're hearing a lot of positive feedback from our members of late. But is anybody else wanting to comment on that, how that seems? No? Well, I will say we're hearing a lot of positive feedback. Especially with the Street Plus and you see the blue uniformed individuals cleaning up the streets.
Yeah,
and
the ambassadors.
Yeah, I think that's really making a big improvement, and we've heard so. You got it, Kathleen? Yeah. Let's just get it on because it's recorded. So
Okay.
I know.
I live and work downtown, and I've shared this story a lot of times. I participate in a lot of organizations, and they have conferences here. And one in particular was like, oh, they're making us go to Manchester. Jeez, it's going to be awful. And they came and they loved it, and they're planning on coming back already. And it's
That's awesome.
it's a great city, and we have a lot to offer, and it is safe. And I was out the other night with some colleagues from out of town. We were walking back from dinner, and a coworker and I were headed down Cat Alley, and my boss, frankly, looked at me and he's like, well, where are you going? And I'm like, well, I live over there. We're walking over there. She's parked over there. I'm going with you. And I'm like, thank you. That's very nice of you. It's very kind. It's unnecessary. And he did. And he saw how it's, we're not maybe the brightest lit city, but we were safe, and it's great. And I think we should be touting that. And I think we're trying.
Yeah. And the trend line, so in policing, they'll say this all the time, and I'll say it today, but what you want to look for in public safety is the trend line. And over the last 5-6 years, you've seen that trend line in public safety really, really go down from in terms of reduction in crime. And it's really been incredible to see. I think one of the challenges that we have here in Manchester is that I would argue we're the only real city in the state of New Hampshire in terms of size, and we're significantly bigger than the other ones that we have here. And we have WMUR in our backyard, and we have the union leader in our backyard, and the great people at Manchester Inc. as well. But so if anything happens here, it's going to get blown up, and you're going to hear about it. And towns of 5,000 people are going to say, oh my gosh, I can't go to Manchester. There was a crime that occurred the other day. Well, we're a city, and we're 115,000. We're the biggest city in the state of New Hampshire, so there are going to be more stories like that here. But Manchester, New Hampshire is a safe city. Objectively, we are a safe city. Can we do more? 100%, which is why I advocated so forcefully on bail reform, which is going to go into effect in September, which is why I really want that Group 2 pension fix to pass in Concord so that we can do better at retaining our employees, which is why I wanted to do the compensation study so that we can pay our police officers, so that we have more on the street. Can we do better? 100%, and we're working on it. But the trend line is unobjectively clear.
So I live and work downtown as well, and just a good data point is that I work in the Beacon building, and years ago I was able to take the garbage out back into the alley and walk over to the house on West Merrimack. And then over the last couple of years, it got so unsafe that I wouldn't do that. But the last year or so, I'm now doing that again. So I feel safe enough that I can actually go out and do that. So that's certainly a good data point, good trend that is happening. And I'm also excited to see we're going to make Hanover Street a destination like 3-star Michelin street as well. So excited about that.
Really exciting.
Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I see Hanover Street from my office, and it's gorgeous when it's lit up the way it is, and you have the beautiful mural there as well, and the great people at the Palace and Rex Theaters doing incredible stuff. We're having a record-breaking year at Southern New Hampshire University, or at SNU Arena, so that's incredible to see. I think I gave a key to the city to the Trans-Siberian Orchestra at the end of last year, and they had 2 shows, 9,000 people apiece, And as I was coming out after the first show, it was like picturesque. There were snowflakes. It was like a Hallmark movie. Snowflakes were falling, and just seeing 9,000 people pour out of the arena and going into our bars and restaurants. And then the Rex, the Palace, was having an event or having a show that night, and they were pouring out of those. And I was talking to some of the bar restaurant owners that I know, and they said they were doing record numbers that weekend. And this year, Q1, Tim Becker runs this new arena, gave a presentation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen last week, and he said we're on pace just in Q1 to vastly exceed what we've done in this city in a long time. And they have some amazing shows coming up this year as well. Fish is coming here. Matt Rife, a comedian, is coming here. There's a few other ones that I think are under wraps right now, but Creed was the other one that someone said to me the other day. But yeah, it's going to be another incredible year.
Any others? I will say personally, I've been downtown a few times over the last couple months, really, where I was here with my kids and I was like, what show is going on? Why are there so many people? And then there weren't even any events going on. So I can just say personally that I think what's happened with the housing filling in is that we're now seeing the faces that are, have been kind of in hibernation because it's been cold. And I'm seeing a ton, our whole team has been noticing, just seeing a ton of new faces on the streets. And so I think that's going to continue. It's really feeling a lot different. So I'm going to thank you for all of your efforts in making that come to life. And it's a lot of work. And also for being here today to share with us and let us ask direct questions. Is there any final burning? I think you guys are all looking good. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Really appreciate your time.
Appreciate you.